The 25th of January 2022 shall forever mark a dark day for British comedy as the legendary writer and comedian Barry Cryer passed away at the age of 86. Making his professional debut at Vivian Van Dam's infamous Windmill Theatre alongside future comedy legends including Spike Milligan, Harry Seacombe, Tommy Cooper and Bob Monkhouse to name just a few, Cryer cultivated a relentless passion for comedy. Yet an eczema flare-up encouraged him to become a writer, and the drag sensation Danny LaRue offered him an opportunity to flex his skills. In 1966, a chance meeting with David Frost would result in Barry collaborating on a new review-style show that united a certain Ronnie Barker with Ronnie Corbett for the Frost Report, which in turn spawned the heavyweight Two Ronnies. Yet on radio, Cryer became a regular on the comedy panel show I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue alongside Tim Brooke-Taylor and Humphrey Lyttelton, which brought him cult following for almost 50 years. I caught up with the writer and comedy historian Louis Bath to celebrate the life and legacy of one of the most important figures in the history of British comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's remember the legend that was Barry Cryer.
Right. So, Louis, welcome back to Beyond the Title for this special episode.
Yeah.
Is launching our Barry Cryer series. Firstly, why do you think Barry Cryer was so integral to the course of British comedy?
Barry is so integral to the course of British comedy because he was there for so much of it, but he also had this marvelous ability to harmonize all of the different strands of comedy. And he could flip between music hall and alternative with equal conviction. He wasn't tied to one era, and he loved and was loved by performers and writers of all eras and generations. He's a big old mate of Bruce Forsyth, but also Rick and Aid were friends as well, and and he always said a very important thing, which is that there's great comedy and bad comedy in every generation. There's no golden age, and he always had a very open mind. He always had a very open mind to comedy, and he was also a very good sounding board. When other comedians would come to him and sort of talk to him, he'd listen, and he was a great script writer and a great script editor as well. But he also, he had this huge frame of reference. He had a lot of knowledge which he wore very lightly. Yeah, he did. He worked with everyone, as Josh said. Yeah, completely. Because we think of Barry more in his performing mode, but before that, he was, a gag man for hire, a jobbing comedy writer who would, one day be doing stuff with Russ Abbott, next day be doing stuff with David Frost. And he was working on all those levels, and with the Frost stuff in the 60s. You had the Two Ronnies there and all that, and doing comedy, but he was doing the satirical and political stuff as well. There was this realization. I can't remember who told me. I think it was William G. Stewart, who said, in the Frost office, we worked out that between us, we could get to everybody directly except the Queen. And everybody, from Wee Georgie Wood upwards, actually, that's a bad example. Barry didn't dislike many people, but I remember once mentioning Wee Georgie Wood, and his face crumpled, and he said, "Oh, Louis, please don't mention that
man." The Windmill Theatre is frequently cited as one birthplace of modern British comedy. Why do you think it became responsible for so many of our greatest comedy stars?
The Windmill was a really interesting situation, because I think why it became such a breeding ground for comedians was, if you could survive the Windmill, you could survive anything. And Baz was you know, as my lovely friend Jill Millard Shapiro was Windmill Girl, but of course Baz and Brucey and all of those others were Windmill Boys. Oh, and she always, you know, she still refers to them all as, yeah, I think you're a windmill boy or a windmill girl all your life. And the story of how Baz had his return ticket and took a small chance, went and auditioned for the windmill and was told, "Oh, this is your dressing room, you're on," and didn't use his return portion. Um, and yeah, I think it created tremendous resilience in performers and resignation. You knew how to deal with tough crowds, and I mean later, Baz dealt with tough crowds in the cabaret years, not least at Danny LaRue's club. I think it was a lovely evening. John Lennon heckling Danny LaRue and being put in his place. And at the time, John Lennon was the biggest star in the world, one of the biggest stars in the world. And afterwards, I think Danny said, "Oh, I went a bit too far there," and John Lennon went, "No, no, no, you were right. I was an arsehole." Yeah.
And talking to Barry about the windmill, he often became very protective of the subject of nudity.
Yes.
Why
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
think he was adamant about nudity as an art form?
Well, I think he did it very well. Sorry. Baz never went nude. Just to clarify, I think he was very protective of it because you've got this perception, and people say, "Oh, windmill girls. They were all loose ladies," and and they weren't. They were perfectly ordinary human beings with husbands, children, and whatever. The fact that they, but also the windmill wasn't a strip show. It was these still tableau, and it was incredibly demure and refined. It was almost like it was almost like an art, like a painting, rather than a picture, a photograph, or So I think I think he was protective of the windmill because of the perception of what the nudity meant, and of course we all know why the audience was there, but these days, compared to what we see, compared to what we see anywhere these days, it was incredibly innocent and demure.
It is more is that how to when you can't have that wrong.
If that's what audiences went in there for, you can't really say wrong.
Yeah.
And looking at the windmill generation as a whole, what do you think the comedy landscape would look like without Van Damme?
I think the comedy landscape would look very different without Van Damme because once you impressed Van Damme, he was on your side, and he gave you time to develop. And in a world once you got past that audition, and if people weren't cutting it at the windmill, he'd let them down very gently and give them explain why it wasn't working, why it wasn't, what to, people would come back and they'd have worked on their stagecraft and oh right, yeah, you're ready now. But there were no real schools for comedy. Comedy was, you picked it up as you went along, and you were either funny in, I suppose after the war, the vast number of performers came out of the army, the air force, or whatever, and were, they'd done gang shows and they'd done things like that. So, yeah, I think the windmill Um, but also, I think the windmill, because of where it was, meant that if you were really good, you'd be seen and you'd be snapped up.
Mm.
Because the
Yeah.
agents were all, round the West End. They'd pop in and say, "Oh, who's good today?"
Yeah.
I tried to organize one in
The
tried to organize that one in the
the grade organisation were always in there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Billy Marsh and all those lads around, just round the corner on Regent Street. So, yeah.
Why do you think the cabaret scene in the West End was so vibrant in the 1960s?
I think the cabaret scene, people. Hang on, my mic's doing something strange. Hang on.
Yeah.
That's better. That's it. Sorry, the compressor was getting a bit
No, worries.
hardy.
Do you want
Yeah.
me to ask it again?
Sorry.
Do you want me to ask it again?
Can do. Yeah.
So why do you think the cabaret scene in the West End was so vibrant in the 1960s?
Well, I mean, the cabaret scene in London, London was the epicenter of entertainment and everything, especially when the Beatles got going. So yeah, people were coming to London. They wanted a night's entertainment, and I think with cabaret clubs, you could go to the theatre and whatever, and then you go to the cabaret club afterwards. It was a late night thing, and you got a tiny little bit of that still left with Ronnie Scott's, which is jazz club, but it's still part of that London clubland. It's probably the last surviving element of it. Yeah, but you had Winston's, you had Churchill's, and you had Danny LaRue's club. And Danny came through both. Danny and Baz came through those clubs, and yeah, it was. And also, I think something else about those cabaret clubs. It was where the pros went after their shows. So you'd be sitting there, you know, pretty good food, wine and whatever, and you'd be sitting there and there'd be, "Oh, who's that at the next table?" So it was a big thing. It was I think it was exciting. I think it was the 60s. It was an exciting time to be in London, and I think the cabaret clubs were part of a reflection of that, but also part of what made it exciting.
And knowing Barry and how direct he could be both in his writing and his character,
Yeah.
Josh can't imagine how Danny LaRue knew he was going to be the right person to write for him. Why do you believe they hit it off?
I think Baz was unshockable. And I think that we talked earlier about being open-minded. So we've talked about Baz being open-minded in terms of comedy. He was open-minded as a human being. He was not absolutely non-judgmental about everything. He was yeah, no, I mean, in all of our conversations, he was always so incredibly sound and right on about everything, and there was a complete absence of cruelty there. Sometimes some comedic malice, but that would be for comic effect. He was a delightful human being. So, but he also had that little bit of spice where he would find the filth, the self-cleaning filth, as they called it. But he could look at something. He was unshockable, unfazable, very unflappable, very easygoing, and he could see the way through a situation in terms of comedy. But he was great around people. He's great with people, and I think in show business, there are a lot of people who get reputations for being difficult to work with. And then you get people like Baz who get reputations for being can work with absolutely anyone and did.
and he never ever got so
And he never forgot a face.
Yeah. Oh no. He was he was he had an astonishing memory, and he never forgot a joke either.
Mm.
Which was- no, faces, names, jokes. Yeah, I, in 20, 23 years of knowing him, I only ever got to the end of one joke that he hadn't heard before. And the code word, if he'd heard it, was banana. So you'd be starting, and then about halfway through you go banana. Oh, okay. And one day we were sitting in the coal hole in the Strand having a pint, and he'd been watching one of those documentaries on Yesterday Channel or whatever the night before about Rommel
Yeah.
and El Alamein, and I saw my opportunity, and I remembered this joke that my mate Jeff Hiscott, a bass player who I sometimes play in bands with, um, told me, and he caught me with it as well. I went, oh. I said, "Oh, well, you know that Rommel was a huge fan of jazz guitar," and Baz looked at me, and he went, "Are you serious?" And I went, "Yeah." Every morning at El Alamein, he stuck his head out of his tent and said, "Where's Montgomery?" And he looked at me for a fraction of a second, and the eyes narrowed. He went, "You bugger." He said, I'm having that though." I went, "Yeah, no, feel free. It wasn't mine." But that's the only joke I ever got to tell him that he hadn't heard before. And it was, yeah, it was a marvelous moment. I don't know. Maybe if I'd been more overt about it being a joke, maybe he'd have used that phenomenal brain of his to work out where it was going. But the tag wasn't obvious in the way it was told, and he had that brief moment of credulity where he was thinking. And the thing is, he knows I know about jazz.
Yeah.
So he knew I knew about jazz. It's very strange talking about him in the past tense because just those phone calls. You said. And I remember actually the last phone call, which the famous ring round, where he rang round and told the Archbishop of Canterbury joke. And thinking back to it, I realised that it was tying up the loose ends because my Morecambe and Wise book had come out the year before, and I'd sent him a copy before it came out. And virtually the first thing in that last phone call, he said to me, he said, "Oh, look, have I told you how much I enjoyed your Morecambe and Wise book?" I went, yeah. When it came out, I sent you a copy. You rang up and said, "Oh," he said, "Oh, good. I just wanted to make sure that you knew." And it's like he just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that make sure there was no unfinished business. He just wanted me to know. I think tremendously sweet, and it was quite sad in a way because we were meant to be doing the Harpenden thing, where Josh and I met, and I said to him, "Oh, I'll see you in a couple of weeks," and he went, "Oh, what's that?" "Oh, Harpenden, yeah." And I think he knew that we wouldn't see each other.
Yeah.
And yeah.
when I did my ceremony, oh, he went me up the street. Sorry, not the way that I come in London no, no, okay. That was the we
Who did you show it?
oh
Arthur Milton.
and I he
Arthur Smith. When Josh was doing his show
Yeah.
with Arthur Smith, Barry rang him the week before and said
Yeah.
sorry that he couldn't make it and to give the hell. And that was the last time Josh heard from him.
Yeah. No, that yeah, that very that yeah. Was that would have been about the same time, yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So he just again a very, very thoughtful person.
And obviously Barry met Ronnie Corbett at Winston's. How do you think the relationship between the two of them was pivotal to the longevity of the two Ronnies?
Well, the thing is, yeah, I mean, people like to work with people they know and trust. And I think Ronnie Corbett, you know, going back with Barry so far, it meant he always had someone there who knew him incredibly well, knew what worked for him.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Ronnie Barker was a one man powerhouse writing all the stuff and everything. So yeah, I think Ronnie appreciated having someone in his corner, so to speak.
I so I've been in but I found me and only
He said it was interesting that Barker was a street performer, whereas Barry and Ronnie Corbett had come up through the circuit.
Yeah, but Ronnie had come up through acting. He'd been in rep and that. Yeah. So and Ronnie was more cabaret comedy musical. Yeah. That yeah, it's a very good point.
To you it would
Do you think it would have worked without Barry?
I think it's hard to say whether it would have happened without Barry because
yeah
you know Barry was the common element between Frost, Barker, Corbett. You know, maybe it would have happened, and maybe it would have been just as good. But who knows? Who can tell? But I think it might have happened in a different way. But I think I think those two performers would have ended up together somehow. Because someone Bill Cotton spotted them
yeah
on the Frost show and go, oh, can we get them away from Frost? Oh, yeah, then we've got something. So yeah, so I think, but I think, I mean, but if you look at those early two Ronnies the script credits, and you've got Eric Idle and everyone writing for them. So it's Baz was the common element for so much, and but one of the things as a script writer, he knew what that performer how that performer worked best.
Mm.
So, for example, some performers would have wanted, Frankie Howard wanted everything written down,
Mm.
every pause, every hesitation, every aside written down. Whereas with people like Les Dawson and Kenny Everett, they were rip and read comedians. They'd come up with a gag, bung it up on a cue card, and that was the first. The first take was always the best. Baz said the first take was always the best with Dawson and Everett. He said, and you'd watch during a week working on a Says Les show, you'd watch Les get bored and his interest would dip off.
Mm.
And he said it was always first take was always the best one. Yeah, but he could work in both modes. That he wasn't, right. No, you're going to have this scripted now, and you're going to learn it. It was, this is the way I work. It was, how do you work best, and how can we make this work best? He was a great collaborator.
Mm.
He wrote sitcoms with Graham Chapman. Wrote No, That's Me Over Here for Ronnie Corbett, and that's not an immediate and natural partnership. If you know anything about the history of British comedy, you think, what? Barry Cryer and Graham Chapman wrote sitcoms together. Yeah.
And he wrote me. Hey.
You work with Michael Palin as well.
Oh yeah, and I think Michael Palin is another one of those people who everybody loves and can get on with everyone. Yeah, so I think yeah, in the Python team, Michael Palin was probably this emollient influence.
Mm.
And I think in a lot of different writers' rooms, Baz fulfilled a similar position, because he could harmonize people, and he was just very, very good with people.
Mm. And on the Frost Report, Barry was among some of the cream of British writing talent, from Dennis Norden to the future Pythons. How do you think he managed to straddle both generations?
Now see, this is the fascinating thing. Baz, as celebrated as he became, and absolutely at the top of the industry, he was in awe of people like Dennis Norden and Frank Muir. And he said, I can't believe that my heroes are my friends. And he said, and people, you put us together and say, the comedy writers like these, Barry Cryer, Frank Muir, Dennis Norden. He said, but they're, they're Frank Muir and Dennis Norden. I can't even come close. And I went, well, and yeah, so he was always a bit of a fanboy right to the end. It was incredibly sweet, yeah. And but he was also a fanboy of newer, younger comedians. I mean, he adored Ross Noble. He adored Stuart Lee. I mean, of course the famous story about Stuart Lee at Edinburgh and the gaping anus of Christ. Do you know this one?
No.
Yeah, you know the story.
No?
No.
No. Apparently not.
Where Stuart Lee was standing, and Baz kept looking across at him, narrowing his eyes, and Stuart Lee ended up walking over and saying, "Is there something wrong, Baz?" He said, "Yeah, you stole my gaping anus of Christ routine." It was just so out. It would have been so out of character. But it was just beautiful. But he spent that time setting the joke up, just looking. And he used that sort of narrowing of the eyes quite a lot. I remember once I was at a do with my then partner, and she went, "Oh my God, Barry Cryer's over there. You know him, don't you?" And I went, "Yeah." And I said, "Right, be prepared. When we see each other, we will insult each other, because
Mm.
that's what we do.
Yeah.
And so we were standing there with our drinks, and he kept looking across at her, yeah, smiling. And eventually, on one of those, he just turned, he looked over, saw me, looked back at her, and just looked at her and went, "What are you doing with him?" And I went, "Hello, Baz," and it, cuddle, and how are you, and all that. Yeah, and it was, yeah. I had to tee up. We will do this. He'll say something. I said, yeah, it was, yeah, yeah. But I think, yeah, it was perfect. What are you doing with him? It's a very good question.
And obviously, the Frost Report spawned one of the greatest stories in the history of British comedy with the mysterious Gerald
The
Wiley.
mysterious Gerald Wiley, and of course, Baz has the punchline.
Yeah, although Barry loved to tell the story, do you actually think he might have rumbled Barker?
I think he might have had an inkling. Yeah, yeah. But there's another lovely Ronnie Barker story about the book signing.
Yeah.
where Baz went up with heavy disguise, gave a false name, handed this book over, and got away and found it had been signed by Ronnie Barker. Piss off, Cryer, I'm working. Yeah. No, it was sorry, yeah, where were we?
The Do you think he might have rumbled Barker?
Yes. Oh yeah. I think he might have had an inkling. He was very sharp and perceptive. I think, he might have had a slight idea of what was coming.
In the how did they get
In that era, how did they get the material into the BBC?
Well, I mean, how do you mean? How did they get the material in? So was it?
come home look
Because someone must have known it was coming from him.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm probably not the best person to ask. I don't know. I think it was sort of posted in or sent in through an agent. Yeah, I think it was just posted in. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So someone in contracts must have known.
yeah, and put her his agent.
His agent was Peter Lee.
Agent.
Eve.
He agent.
He was a.
Agent.
He was an acting agent.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, agent, but then in
So would an acting agent be sending in the script?
yeah.
I don't know.
No.
No.
I don't know. No.
So, staying with the two Ronnies, As
Yeah.
well as Gerald Wiley, the show boasted a stellar roster of writers from John Sullivan to David Renwick. How integral was Barry to providing the glue that held this creative team together?
Well, I think Barry, in any writing team, he was someone who worked well with everyone. He was a catalyst, and you could have a writing team of very, very disparate personalities, and you would need, with a group like that, you'd need someone like Barry to sort of intermediate between all of them. He had his own style, but he was, able to adapt to all sorts of other things, and also he was just, very friendly with everyone and very encouraging. So and he, again, also with the two Ronnies, he was one of Ronnie C's oldest friends. But he also had, the connections with all the Pythons and all that. So he crossed so many, he was the diplomat in the whole thing.
Go do you remember when he hosted that show
Do you remember when he hosted the show about the two Ronnies?
When was that?
In 1999.
Vaguely. Was that a BBC thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, vaguely. But I can't bring any detail. I can't bring any details.
Well, you had the yeah.
Okay.
They had both the Ronnies there and they were being interviewed, and Barry was the main host.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's not something I can really it's not something I can really go into.
Kenny Everett remains one of the most original characters in both television and radio. In your opinion, how influential was Barry in being a reliable pair of hands alongside such a maverick?
Sorry. Barry's contribution to the Kenny Everett TV shows. Kenny was a radio guy. And in radio, you can have an idea, make it very quickly, and there it is. It's, and also, he could do stuff with voices. You don't need the costumes. It would all be very rip and read, very quick. Barry and Ray Cameron found a way of converting that speed of process from radio to television, and they would write, they'd be writing gags there and then and bung it up on the auto cue. And the first take was the one, because Everett was a great, quick study. And they understood that he didn't like rehearsing. He got bored. Les Dawson was another one who got bored. I remember Baz telling me that, you'd have a week's rehearsal for a Says Les, and, the day before the recording, Les would be dipping off. He'd be losing interest. And, they'd have to, try and keep him on. Again, Barry and Ray Cameron would have to keep him on the straight and narrow and say, look, no. And Baz and David Mallet, who directed the Everett shows and a lot of the Says Les shows, both said that if they could have done Says Les like they did the Everett shows, with that hand him a gag, done, camera crew laugh, brilliant, Yeah, David Mallet said we were working towards what we did with Everett with Les Dawson. You know, if we could have done that, and of course, where David Mallet had made lots of pop videos and things like that, you know, Ashes to Ashes, the Bowie video. So David was able to bring the comedy experience with Les and also the pop video experience with people like Bowie and all that, and bring it all together. And, you know, and Baz brought the variety, brought the old school. But also another thing that Baz and Everett saw very much eye to eye on was the self-cleaning filth. You know, they would, you know, do the risque jokes, and Baz, you know, Baz was clean, but he loved a risque joke. Did I tell the story that Baz? I remember talking to Baz once, and he said, you know, I'm clean. You know, I don't do dirty jokes. He said, but there are some jokes that you need the swear to make it work. You need the swearing to make it work. And recently I saw someone on Blue Sky attribute a joke to Bernard Cribbins. And it was this joke. And it was the joke that Baz used as the example of a joke that needs swearing. And it was, you know, a door-to-door salesman knocks on the door of this house, big posh suburban house. Door opens, and there's this little kid with a huge cigar and a balloon of brandy in his hand, from 5 or 6 years old, standing on the doorstep. And the door-to-door salesman leans in and says, "Are your mummy and daddy at home?" The kid takes a puff of the cigar, looks over his shoulder and says, "I fucking hope not." Now, what I found was fascinating, and I think there is video of Bernard Cribbins telling this joke on telly or something, and I got into this. Did Cribbins tell it to Baz? Did Baz tell it to Cribbins? And, you know, and I think we worked out that Baz told it to Cribbins. The timeline of the whole thing was, right, okay, so Baz had it first, but I recognised it as, and of course they were great friends, so it would have been one of those things. And also the reason I knew Baz told it to Cribbins was because Baz would have told it to me, and he would have added, "Oh, I got this one from Bernie Cribbins." So yeah, but you know, the archaeology of this stuff is fascinating. But of course, you know, Baz came up with a lot of gags himself, but he was also the old joke, but Barry Cryer, thief of bad gags, yeah, receiver of stolen goods. You know, the time what Spike Milligan once threw himself up against a wall, hands up, and says, "Don't hurt me, but Cryer, just take the gags." But Baz used to harvest gags, and he would file. You know, Bob Monkhouse had his books, Baz had his mind, but they would be filed away in a similar way, like Monkhouse and the books, and you know, the gag would come out. You know, it would be a gag for, you know, a situation would come up, and yeah, there's that one. And a very close friend of Baz's, a guy called Neil Shand, who wrote with Milligan and was also on the Frost writing team. And I knew Neil as well. And Neil said, and Neil had been retired years when he said this, he said, "You do realise that I sit there with the paper in the morning, I'm reading the Times, and I'm seeing every story in terms of the gags, and I'm coming up with the gags, and I can't switch off. I'm always in that. I'm always in that Frost writer mode." And he said, you know, and I'll ring Cryer up and say, "Page 3, Times, third column in," and they'd trade the gags that they were coming up with. You know, and there's another one, again, back to Monkhouse. Anthony Wall, who made Arena, went to visit Bob Monkhouse at home to talk about a project, and a fire engine went past. Bob went to the window and stood there and looked out, and he said, "Anthony, you won't understand this, but it's a comedy writer thing. I now have 84 fire engine jokes going round my head, and I need to tell someone." And those writers at that level, would ring each other up. What have you got for the invasion of Iraq? What do you think about this business? What do you think about this defection? What do you think about? Oh God, what do you think about Andy Burnham? Now they would be doing and they would just be over the morning coffee making each other laugh. Yeah. And that whole generation of writers that Cryer, Shand, it was an astonishing talking to them. It was an astonishing insight into how a comedy writer thinks. And of course, Frost was. I can't remember whether it was Cryer or David Nobbs who told me, but he never Frosty never said, "This is terrible, do it again." His way of encouraging writers to rewrite and perfect would go, "This gag is super. Can we make it just that little bit more super?" Beautiful management, and shows why people loved working with it. And but it's William G. Stewart, who produced and directed so many things, and also hosted 15 to 1. He was one of the directors in the Frost program days, and so in that office, you'd have all of these disparate personalities, Anthony J, Nobbs, Baz, all of that, Clive Irving, people like that, people, and some of them were politics, some of them were comedy, some of them, and William G, he said, one day we were sitting there and it was a bit quiet, and we worked out that between us, the only people we couldn't get through to directly were the President of the United States and the Queen. Because between us, we could get through to everyone from Jimmy Tarbuck to Harold Wilson. We had the connections, and Baz had the connections with the variety and comedy people, and it's just, and in later life when I got to know him, it was through the Oldie magazine, and they used to have these fantastic lunches at Simpsons in the Strand, and just watching and hanging around Baz when there were people from Ingram's had this strange ability to get these unbelievable people to come along for the lunches and come along and receive an award or whatever. And just watching Baz with these people who had been movers and shakers in the 60s and the 70s and whatever, and it was like, but also it was interesting seeing him with people that he was friendly with everyone, but I don't think it's any great secret that Baz was fundamentally old Labour, socialist, left wing, solid social credentials. He used to read The Guardian and the Daily Mail for a laugh. Guardian for the serious stuff and the Daily Mail for a laugh. He said, and between that, I got it covered. I had all the angles. Yeah. And but seeing him with some of these Tory grandees from the old days who used to come along, but also you'd look across the room, and there on a chaise longue, Kenneth Griffith would be holding court, and it's just this astonishing gathering, and everyone knew Baz. Everyone.
Yeah, only remember going how and he said me are you in the room? And on his phone got to me. But when he said, yeah, he just
At the what club?
gold.
Gold.
G-O-L-F.
Goals.
F.
Golf. Oh. Josh went to Barry's house and
Oh, yeah.
Barry asked him who he was interviewing next, and he said Jimmy Tarbuck, and Barry said that he could never do what Jimmy had done at the golf club.
What did you do at the golf club?
He said,
He liked entertainment, but he didn't want to be in it.
yeah,
He said,
no,
Oh, yeah. So we're talking about how Tarbuck and his two kept his off stage life very separate.
yeah,
Yeah. Jimmy Tarbuck was, I love Jimmy Tarbuck, and but he's someone who, when he didn't need to work anymore, he didn't. He just just thought, I could go and play golf, Whereas Baz always loved being part of it. Jimmy Tarbuck didn't necessarily like being part of it, he'd go on, do his thing brilliantly, and then boom, off. But yeah, I don't remember John Fisher, Funny Way to Be a Hero. It was a great book about comedy, and there's this line about it where John says Jimmy Tarbuck is a comedian who has phenomenal technique that he wastes on dubious material. He says it's like using a power tool to make holes in cheese. Yeah, and that's always stuck with me. But yeah, some of the best bits of Tarbuck I've seen were when they used to do live at the Palladium or live from Her Majesty's or whatever. They'd keep it would be live, and they'd keep the recording going in the theatre, and in the breaks he'd be calling, referring back to stuff. He'd be sort of talking to the audience, and some of the best stuff was just him riffing off the audience. Yeah, he's has he got an autobiography out now?
yeah.
Yeah, I must get that. I very, very. I interviewed Tarby once for the Lady magazine, and about his and Dez's two-man show, which I never saw their two-man show, but I did see Dez's show, which I loved. But then everyone loved Dez, and there's Tarby. And of course, Tarby's great legacy to the world is Lisa, who is fantastic. Saturday nights on Radio 2 is absolutely the best thing. But Tarby liked his downtime, whereas Baz would, go home, spend time with the family. But he'd go out, he'd go to the pub, the Yorkshire Grey, Studio YG1, he'd go into town, catch up with people, but when Baz was with us, if I had to come up from Wales or Gloucestershire, wherever I was living, to London, I would pop into the Yorkshire Grey around the corner from Broadcasting House, and I'd be fairly certain that I would bump into people I knew. Sometimes it'll be Dirk Maggs, sometimes it'll be Russell Davis, but quite often it was Baz. You'd go in there and we'd look across at each other and go, "Oh, it's you, is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah." And yeah, and I remember when he was doing a Saint Shane. He used to come into town early to do the show, and come to the pub, and before he went on, we'd have a couple, me, him, Ben Tisdall from the Oldie, who he loved talking. He was just incredibly interested in people, and if you were in a gathering and there was someone who wasn't comedy or industry or whatever, he'd bring them in and ask them questions and find things out about them. He was just really sort of fascinated with humanity. And there are some people who are fascinating in all the wrong ways, but he was to use a Nobbsism, he was a people person.
Yeah. I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue began life as a one-off Christmas special. What was it about the chemistry between the cast which took on a life of its own?
Well, I mean, I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue see, the thing is, I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue ran for a very long time before it became what we know and love as I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. It was always great, and it was always, that group of people making each other laugh and doing stupid things. But the I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue that we know and love really came together when John Naismith came in to produce, and Ian Pattinson came in to be the program associate or your writer. That Ian would come up with the most fantastic things, and I think it was about the sort of time it had been running since like 1972, and it was a lot of BBC radio comedy things that have run forever. But do sometimes need to be sent to live on a farm in Wales. But when Clue was getting long in the tooth and starting to look like a relic, it suddenly was reinvented and became this huge cult thing. And I think it was that thing in the 90s when we started reevaluating comedy and reevaluating, because in the 80s there had been the old school comics and the arrival of the alternative comics. And Clue was sort of old school, and then it sort of was reinvented. It became hip again. It took on some of the it had always been there, but I think Naismith and Pattinson ramped up the subversive element of it, and also played wonderfully with Humph as the authority figure. And it was. I think I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue had 20 years as a relatively standard BBC panel game, or something quite like it, and then it became this, the antidote to panel games as it's described, and I think it became originally weren't they going to be alternating chairs, and Baz was going to be the chair at one, Baz and Humph, and there was, I think very early on that was the case. Yeah, but and of course, one of the things that you had from Clue was that glorious combination of Baz and Willie Rushton. And, I do think Willie Rushton is... See, Willie Rushton, he's interesting because when I'm 52, and when I was a kid, he was on telly all the time in things, Celebrity Squares, Quick on the Draw. That was a great show. It's a sort of daytime... a daytime thing hosted by Bob Monkhouse, where they'd have various cartoonists on, and they would do visual gags, and they'd sit at easels and write the gags, draw the gags, and fantastic show. I don't know if it's ever made it out onto DVD. I don't know, before Network went down the tubes, that would have been a natural for them. But yeah, and Rushton was a very, very good cartoonist, and he was on that, and he again, he had this subversive element. He was he was this sort of establishment figure, but and of course he'd been one of the founders of Private Eye, but yeah, But Willie and Baz sparked off each other so wonderfully, and of course went did their 2-man show, and yeah, I remember. And I never saw the 2-man show, but I saw Baz do his show with Colin Self. So it's a 2-man show, but not with Willie Rushton, and he would put, if he knew I was in the audience, I think, I'm not building my own part up here. I think if he knew any friend was in the audience, he would put in little things that the friend would recognise.
Yeah.
And he would go, "Did you like that, Louis?" or something like that. And I'm sure he would have done it to Josh as well.
Yeah.
He put put a reference in, and then did you get that? Yep. Yeah. So it was yeah. It was
The show. He saw that show a lot.
Yeah.
He said he must have seen it about 6 times.
Oh, amazing. I think it's about 3 for me.
I haven't watched it, so apologies.
Yeah. You probably
Yeah, I probably wasn't born, so not my fault.
No, you are forgiven. You do have a perfect excuse.
What would you say your favourite Barry Cryer joke is?
Oh.
You've given us a few, but we need your favourite one.
My favourite Barry Cryer joke. It's the one. It is the last joke he told me. He told me he did on that final ring round. He did the Archbishop of Canterbury joke, which was reported at the time. But he did a similar joke about this woman and her husband, and they see this chap on the other side of the road, and she goes, "Oh my God, it's that old magician, the Great Marvo." And the husband goes, "What?" She said, "No, I saw him at the music hall many, many times. He had this astonishing act where he would wrap a solid iron bar around his erect member. Go on, ask if it's him." So the husband goes across and says, "Excuse me, are you the Great Marvo?" And the old boy looks up and says, "What? good Lord, you're too young to remember that. Yes, I am. And he says, do you still do the, and he replies, not since my wrists went. Which, and yeah, yeah, not since my wrists went. It's a lovely, lovely joke. I prefer it to the Archbishop of Canterbury one, but you know, it's yeah, and yeah, that and the little boy at the door. Those are the two jokes that, yeah, I'll always think of when it comes to Baz. Yeah.
The nun. Do you remember the nun on the train?
Oh, can you remind me?
I can't tell it. He can't tell it very well, apparently.
No, it's ringing a vague bell. It's ringing a vague bell. Oh, another great Barry Cryer joke. It's a train, and it's religious personages on a train. This is what, you know, you've inspired me. The ticket inspector walks up and down the train saying, do we have any Catholic priests or Anglican bishops on the train? Walks up and down a couple of times. Anglican priests or Catholic bishops? And on about the third time going up and down, this little hand goes up and says, I'm a Methodist minister, if that's any use to you. And he says, well, that's a very kind offer, but we were looking for someone with a corkscrew. Yeah. Say what?
I don't get that one.
You don't get it? Well, Methodists don't drink.
Oh, okay.
Whereas Catholic priests and Anglican bishops do love the communion wine.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Kind of a similar question, but what's your favourite memory of Barry?
My favourite memory of Barry. My favourite memory of Barry is sitting in the coal hole on the Strand just before an oldie of the year, and David Nobbs, Baz and I are sitting there having a pint right before we go in, and then David Nobbs walks in. He's early as well. He's come down from, he was living in North Yorkshire. He's come down from North Yorkshire, and it's Barry Cryer and David Nobbs, and we're just sitting in the pub, the three of us, and, you know, just having a quiet bite. And it's just, you know, I just, you know, sat there listening to these two giants, these two people I had revered and admired so well. And, you know, after that, I got to know David a little and interviewed him for my Les Dawson book. But it was, you know, the memory of sitting there with two of my heroes, but two of my heroes, and we were just three blokes having a pint, and it was beautiful. It was, I just feel so lucky to have known these people, been around these people. You bothered them. I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, Jiminy Cricket, the annoying little thing on the shoulder, you know. And sometimes Baz would say to me, Louis, shush, just listen. Just listen. You don't have to keep, you know, sometimes, you know, of course, being me with my ADHD brain and the, you know, dates and facts and whatever. And, you know, I remember once, you know, I belted something out. Baz was talking about something. I went, oh, yeah. And Baz just looked around at me and said, Louis, I was there. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Point. Good point. Well made. You know, yeah. And I think hanging around with Baz, I think made me a better researcher and a better interviewer because, you know, as I went on and interviewed people for various books and things, I viewed it as a failure if you heard too much of me on the interview tape. And I think, you know, I got to the point where just sit back and let it wash over you. And it did. You know, I was just very, very lucky that, you know, you'd say one thing and it would go in a certain direction, and then they go, I didn't realize I'd remembered so much. I thought I'd forgotten it all. Oh, when we spoke last time, did I do the story about the National Film Theatre?
I don't know. Go again if you.
The one, because there was a Kenny Everett night at the National Film Theatre, and I was chairing it. There were various things being screened, lost Everett shows, and an edition of Nice Time, which was a TV show he did for Granada in the late 60s, produced by John Burt. And I remember introducing this, and the NFT crowd all booed the name John Burt. And then having a drinky afterwards, Dick Fiddy said, it's a bit of a strong reaction to John Burt's name, wasn't it? And Dick Fiddy said, yeah, I didn't see what he made of it. And I went, what? He went, he was there. He'd come in as a paying punter to watch his old show. Yeah, and which is it's a real shame, because, you know, I would have loved to talk to him about stuff. You know, his management style at the BBC, I'm not a fan of, but when he was at London Weekend in Granada, he did so much interesting stuff, and I think, you know, I would love to have had a little chat with him about some of that. But anyway, no. So we're on the stage, and it's me chairing it. Baz to my left-hand side, strategically, because I could be on his better side, and I could, if there was anything quiet, I could repeat it to him. You know, during the Q&A, there was a lot of, what did he say? He said, yeah. And there was James Hogg, biographer, and lovely, much missed David Stafford, biographer and comedy writer, wrote some amazing stuff with Alexei Sayle. David was a sweetheart and a very, very underrated comic writer. And we're sitting there, and you know, at these events, there are a lot of people that put the hand up and say, not so much a question, more of an observation, really. It's like, oh God, and you know it's going to be about 5 minutes long and go nowhere.
Yeah.
And there was this bloke who put his hand up, and he asked this rambling question, and I was following it so that because I knew I'd get a tug on the sleeve, and Baz would say, "What did he say?" And 5 minutes. No, I'm exaggerating, but it was a long question, and we got to the end of it, and Baz went, "What did he say?" I said, "He asked, was it different at Thames?" And this bloke looked daggers at me because I butchered his question, but that really was all he'd asked. You know, was it different working at Thames to how it was at the BBC? It's just, it's one of my favourite moments. Was it different at Thames? It reminds me of the form of it. Reminds me of a very old joke about a military club, and there's these two slightly deaf old generals sitting by the fire, and there's this brash American comes in, and they start talking, and they start talking, and so, how well do you know the British Isles? He said, well, I was stationed over here in 1941, and I, over at East Anglia in Norfolk. Oh, I had a great time. It was wonderful. All those country house parties. And what did he say? He said he served in Norfolk in the Second World War. And he said,
Yeah, there was one gal, one swell gal. We had a lot of fun in those hotels, all those seaside hotels all around East Anglia. What was her name? It mentions the name, and and the old boy says, "What did he say?" And the other one says, "He says he knew mother." Yeah, yeah. What did he say? Was it different at Thames?
And just to finish up,
Yeah.
what would you say Barry's legacy was?
Barry's legacy. Barry's legacy is many. It comes in many forms. There are many aspects to it. It's the fact that we're going to be talking about him for years to come. It's the fact that the people that he encouraged will be talking about him for years to come, and acknowledging the influence of Barry Cryer. I did have something else. I think. Oh, God, I was heading somewhere there, and I've completely forgotten it. No, it's gone, completely gone. What? I think the legacy of Baz is going to be the stories, the memory, the stories he told, and the memories that he left us, and the people who knew him all remembering those phone calls. And I can't bring myself to take his number out on my phone. Even though I know it's not going to ring, even though I know it's, but when I used to see that number going, oh great, yeah, okay, Barry, it's Cryer here. That's Cryer. Yeah, I know which one it is. He'd always Cryer here. That's Cryer. Yes, yeah. There's only one. There's only one. Yeah, and yeah, no, he was an astonishing man who did so much, covered so much, and to operate in the field that he did and not have any enemies, that really says a lot. Because yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful things about Baz was he played it down. He'd say, "Oh, I'm just a one-liner man. I'm a gag merchant." But he knew how good he was, but he didn't clobber you over the head with it. He didn't go, "Look at me, look at me." He was at his best in collaboration. Just sitting there in a pub, listening to him, and other people throwing things in, and him going, "Oh yeah, and I remember this and I remember that." And but also one of the things I loved about Baz, it wasn't always gags. We'd talk about family, we'd talk about serious stuff, and we'd actually talk about what was going on in the world and whatever. It didn't all have to be a gag. There would usually be one somewhere near the end of it. But I remember once I was talking about genealogy, and he said, "This is why we're friends." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You say genealogy. Some of these buggers say genealogy. It's wrong." Yeah.
In my head,
In Josh's opinion, there's not many people who remain as a constant throughout the history of comedy, but he's one of them.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a thread running through it. And oh yeah. And on the legacy front, I do think one of his great legacies is the is the Ross Noble and Nicholas Parsons story. You know it. The one is up in Edinburgh, and so they're up in Edinburgh, and Nicholas Parsons is talking to Ross Noble, and he says, "So who's your comic hero?" And Ross Noble says, "Oh, my comic hero is Richard Pryor." And he, "Oh, really fascinating. Oh, the way he set himself on fire when he was off his mind on freebase cocaine." And he says, "Oh, astonishing." And Nicholas Parsons is wondering what he's just heard, and later on, at another party, he's overheard talking to someone. "Have you heard the awful news about Richard Bryars?" and that story is doing the round, has done the rounds a lot since Baz died. But that was a story that Baz loved telling, and it's a great story.
He hasn't heard that one before.
You hadn't heard it? Oh God! Oh well, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. So, anything else?